please don't wait until something bad happens to you, until adversity hits. You know, adversity and difficult times impact us all. And if you're not going through that at the moment, someone you know may well be. Of course, we can't stop traumatic experiences from happening, but you can jolly well be sure that you've given yourself the best chance to be prepared and to be able to move through those difficult times easily, and most importantly, come through the other side stronger, and to come through the other side a better person. Now, I've listened to many of you who said to me that you don't particularly like parts 1 and parts 2 of a subject. You prefer it all in one video, as it were. And so what I've done is listen to you, and I've put parts 1 and parts 2 together in one video for you to watch from start to finish, which I hope you do. As I say, there's nothing more comforting than knowing that if the worst case scenario should happen, I know I sound a little bit negative here, but it happens to us all, and I just want you to be ready for it if it should happen to you. Okay, so please watch through to the end, because this information in these 2 videos put together certainly helped me and have helped countless other people who have listened to the information that you're about to listen to. And yes, we're talking about bouncing back better. Now, it is a bit tongue-in-cheek, that, because if you've been with me for any length of time, you will know that I actually despise that language, bouncing back, especially from trauma and adversity. I mean, I don't believe we do bounce back. I don't believe we do bounce back. I believe we inch forward. But bouncing back is in common parlance, and people understand what is meant by it. And let's face it, it's a lot sexier than me saying inch forward slowly. It's probably not what people want to hear. But we can inch forward slowly, and we can come out stronger than before. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, to give any of you out there who have either suffered from trauma, are suffering from trauma, or have been through some kind of adversity that you want to look back at and address, shall we say. That's what I'm talking about today. What we're talking about in terms of, from a psychological point of view then, is post-traumatic growth. Post-traumatic growth. You may not have heard that. You may have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, but you may not have heard of post-traumatic growth. But before we talk about post-traumatic growth, I just want to kind of talk first about what we actually mean by trauma in the first place, because I think that's changed slightly. I think we now take a broader view of what a traumatic experience actually is, and it is personal from Psychology Today, and they say that the word trauma in itself actually means wound or shock or injury. Psychological trauma is a person's experience of emotional distress resulting from an event that overwhelms the capacity to emotionally digest it. You may need to read over that definition again. 2 words in there struck a chord with me. Distress and overwhelm. Okay, so those are, broadly speaking, what we mean by trauma. Apparently, by the age of 16, most of us have experienced at least one traumatic event, a personal traumatic event. Now, out of all the definitions that I've read during my own research, what most accurately describes my experience of trauma is that it's any experience which is deeply distressing and emotionally overwhelming. As I say, those 2 words struck a chord with me. a traumatic experience changes your life. It upends your life. It turns it on its head, and it changes the way you think about life, I believe. Those two words in particular for me, overwhelm and distress, are two that really struck a chord. The thing is, trauma is deeply personal. What is considered traumatic for me may not be traumatic for you, and of course vice versa. Now, I just want to insert here, if you like, for those of you who don't know, I lost my mother at the age of 7. She was 70 when she died with cancer. I lost my sister, again with cancer. She was aged 46. And more recently, my daughter passed away at the age of 31, also with cancer. They were different cancers and totally unrelated. But I tell you that because before I continue, I want you to know that throughout this whole conversation, I am not for 1 minute forgetting that behind those words, traumatic experience, easy words to trip off the tongue, behind those words is anguish and often terror. Now, I don't believe terror is too strong a word. I certainly felt it on more than one occasion myself. But I want to apologise ahead of time if through my own clumsy language and expression I come across in any way as diminishing the strength of emotion that accompanies a traumatic experience. Something else I want to say is if you are struggling through some kind of trauma right now, you need to seek expert help. There's so much research available now. We know so much more about how to help someone going through particular kinds of trauma. There are some things that you just cannot deal with on your own. Please get the help you need. The effects of trauma can be devastating, especially if it goes unresolved. Because it comes back. This can lead to all kinds of negative and unhelpful behaviour coming out in the future related to unresolved trauma. Of course, we all respond in different ways to it. Now, according to positive psychology, Sonia Lyubomirsky, there are 3 paths: surviving, recovery, and thriving. There are people who are so totally crushed by trauma that their lives are never the same again, though thankfully those numbers are smaller than you might think. That may be surprising. They can be said to be surviving. They are alive, but that's about it. As I say, they are crushed and their lives are never the same again. Some people suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is where we tend to hear of trauma. That in itself, post-traumatic stress disorder, we used to associate with soldiers and war and battle. Remember, they used to come home from the war and we called it shell shock, didn't we? Well, now we know that it is not just related to that anyone can suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. What is it? Well, according to psychotherapist Stephen Joseph, it's a complex reaction to trauma with multiple factors involved that can lead to difficulty with coping and individuals struggling to put their lives back together again. Now, positive psychology shows us that we have a baseline of happiness in general. Now, I've talked before that, and I'll probably do it again, that baseline of happiness that we all have and what it's made up of can be raised. We'll talk about that again. But we all have a base level of happiness to which we tend to return after dealing with some kind of adversity. But this works both ways. If you won the lottery, you might think your happiness levels would go way up there. And yes, they might. for a short while. But eventually you'll come back to the way you were before. And it's the same with adversity and trauma, even severe trauma. If you were a happy person before the event, you will eventually return to that level. Of course, if you were not a happy person, then under normal circumstances, you would tend to return back to that not being a happy person. But you return back to whatever your base level of happiness was. And this is the recovery path. Some people may need help to get there, but they do eventually get back to the way they were before. What we're talking about today, and this is where I want to offer hope. What we're talking about today is post-traumatic growth. Now, this is those people who not only return to their base level of happiness, they increase their level of happiness after trauma. Now, this would be the bouncing back scenario, wouldn't it? Except that I guess we should call it bouncing forward, because you're not bouncing back to the way you were before. You are better, you're bouncing forward and actually surpass the way you were before. But I don't want you to think this bouncing back scenario, even people who do experience post-traumatic growth, they do not necessarily recover quickly from their trauma. They don't heal quickly from it necessarily. These people struggle through their adversity and then experience positive growth afterwards. This idea, although obviously it's existed all the time, but the idea was developed by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the 1990s, and they hold that, and there's been tons of research ever since then, but they hold that people who endure psychological struggle following adversity can often see growth afterwards, positive growth. Now, this is where the hope comes in. I was overjoyed to read this, actually. Researchers estimate that half to 2/3 of those who come through trauma may experience aspects of positive growth. Now, please remember, it depends on the person, it depends on the trauma, and timing is crucial. Now, I'm not suggesting that not only should you get yourself through trauma, but you should feel happier after that, happier than before, become better than you were before. I don't want to put you under that kind of pressure. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just asking you to think about it as a possibility. It is a possibility to think about and to give you hope that the future can be better. Speaking from my own story, for certain I have experienced post-traumatic growth. In fact, it's a subject dear to my heart. I've certainly experienced some of the aspects that are said to make up to PTG or post-traumatic growth. One of them is a deeper appreciation of life. Now, there are two ways of looking at this. You can think, how could you possibly be happy after that's happened to you? Or you could think, how can you not be happy? This is where this is what I believe. Life is too short to be anything other than happy, is my way of thinking. My deeper appreciation of life led me to that realisation. I now have a more mindful approach to life, to be more focused and considered about what I'm doing and to enjoy it more. And gratitude comes into that hugely. Number 2, stronger relationships. My relationships are stronger. Caveat here. Relationships with those people who stuck around. Because of course the saying is true, you do find out who are your friends and who are not. Those people who decided to stick around, the relationship is stronger. and therefore that's the positive. Those who didn't stick around, well, that's a learning curve too. Let's think about it in that sense. So I'm also more empathetic towards the plight of others. I mean, I guess I always have been, but certainly more understanding of certain behaviours that someone might display. I have a deeper understanding of what someone's going through, I guess. And then a realisation of personal strength. I mean, this is so true. You know, when you listen to someone telling a story of something bad that may have happened to them, and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, I don't know how you do that. I don't know how I would ever get through that. I wouldn't have the strength to get through that. Well, yes, you would. Yes, you would. It's amazing where your strength comes from, I guess. I mean, we had to deal with some things that beforehand I would never have thought in a million years. A, that this would happen to us, but B, that we would somehow find the strength to deal with it. And of course, this also leads to an increase in confidence, because it makes you think, well, if I've been through this and dealt with it, and, you know, for me, losing my daughter, now, I'm not saying I'll be able to deal with absolutely anything that life throws at me, but I am saying I would be approaching it with a lot more confidence. Let's put it that way. Many people also reported deeper spiritual awareness. I am not there yet with that one. I do understand it. I've struggled a little bit here with this one, but lots of people report that happens to them. Now, these are textbook examples that I'm falling into. I'm not the only one who experiences these things. This is what post-traumatic growth is made up of, these kind of things. Deeper spiritual awareness, feeling personal strength, deeper relationships, and a more appreciation of life. So some people even talk about it becoming a transformative experience, so or see it as a transformative change, in as much as it catapults people into doing things differently, looking at their values or reassessing their values and what life means to them, forcing them to assess the way they live their lives, and then that results into them changing their lives for the better. So changing things such as work that they do, travelling the world, those kind of things. So experiencing these things are examples of post-traumatic growth. Now, let's just use me, coming back to my own story here, because alongside this growth, I would like to tell you I am still grieving for my daughter. I still have moments of flashbacks of some of the traumatic things that she had to endure. I suspect I have some unresolved issues of my own. Now, this is running alongside the fact that I've experienced post-traumatic growth. So I wouldn't want you to think that any of this is easy, or that healing is complete and total. It isn't. These things seem to run alongside each other. What I do want to leave you with is the hope, the understanding that things can get better. Post-traumatic growth, I believe, can be fostered. I want you to remember this. We may not be able to stop the waves, but we can learn to surf. Well, we're talking about post-traumatic growth. Now, also, there's no denying that tragedy and trauma are a part of life for most of us, if not all of us. And there's no way to sugarcoat the fact that if you're going through one of these times in your life, it can be absolute hell. Now, I'm not a trauma expert. I'm a positive psychology practitioner, but I have been through trauma myself, and I know that you can be happy after hurt. So stay tuned. We're all impacted by trauma at some point in our life, personally or globally. So you really need to be ready for it. You need to be trauma informed. It's essential. It's essential. So let's jump straight in. Okay, so I'm going to start. I want to start by looking at what actually physically happens to your body when you're going through trauma of any kind. So when I have spoken publicly about my own trauma, about dealing with my own personal trauma, which is the death of my mum, my sister, and more recently my daughter, people often ask me questions such as, or they say things such as, oh my goodness, how did you cope with that? And how did it make you feel? And I always struggle to have a satisfactory answer to the way it made me feel. I could never express it deeply enough. Until one day I watched an old movie on TV with a very famous scene in it. And as I was watching it, I thought, oh my goodness, that's exactly it. That's exactly how my trauma made me feel. Now I'm going to play the clip, but I'm giving you a warning here. If you are a sensitive soul, you may need to look away. Although it isn't as scary now as it was when it first came out. But anyway, as I say, turn away if you're a sensitive soul. I suspect lots of you will remember this, but here we go. So there you are, trundling through life, trundling along there, doing good, being good, expecting good things to happen. And then this happens. Now, Janet Leigh here is expressing exactly what I felt going through my own personal trauma. Now, I've stopped the scene here because for me and my family, that knife did not actually come down. It stayed poised there for the longest time. We were living with the sword of Damocles hanging over us, never knowing from one minute to the next what was going to happen or to whom. Of course, more recently we went through the whole thing again with my daughter, and unfortunately for my Conroy women, as I call them, my mum, my sister and my daughter, of course the knife eventually did come down and I lost all three most important women in my life to cancer. But coming back to the Hitchcock shower scene here, right at that very moment of trauma, right at that very moment of attack, your body and your brain leap into action to your defence or for your survival. The threat causes your brain to send a signal to the adrenal glands in your body, and it floods your body with fight or flight hormones, such as adrenaline, which gets your heart beating faster and raises your blood pressure to give you more energy, and cortisol to help slow down the other functions in your body that are not needed in a fight or flight situation. This changes your immune system, your digestive system, and so on. It's the most incredible, complex system. I mean, your body's just amazing. Never mind your bonkers brilliant brain, as I call it. Because this complex system that also sends messages to parts of the brain, your parts of the brain that control mood, motivation, and fear. Now, all this happens whilst you are under threat. Of course, once the threat is over, then your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, and that puts you back to what we call rest and digest mode or normality until the next threat comes along. The key, what happens when the threat becomes more permanent. And you can neither fight your way through it or run away. Your body's alarm system stays on. And your body is overexposed to stress hormones, which it can't do anything with. These stress hormones have nowhere to go. You're not fighting or running away. So your body absorbs them. You feel permanently on high alert and constantly feel under attack. Now, this puts you at much greater risk of, amongst other things, headaches, anxiety and depression, digestive problems, muscle aches and pains, sleep problems, weight problems, heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, and so on. So now, being aware of this response, or of how your body reacts when you are in a traumatic situation, or how it will react, you're able to put things into place to avoid the possible consequences I've just talked about of a permanent stress situation. And this leads me to my first tip. And yes, it's physical wellness. And I'm going to talk about diet, but I'm not just talking about eating healthily here. It's more nuanced than that in this situation. You need to be eating simple, easily digested food, so things such as soups, white rice, which I would normally not recommend, but it's more easily digested than whole grain rice from all accounts. But fish, asparagus, bananas, peaches, just Google easily digested food and you'll get a whole list of things, low fat, low carbohydrate, but simple foods, which makes sense because your digestive system is not working at 100%. And you don't want to tax it in this situation. The same goes with your immune system. You need to boost your immune system or keep it at optimum levels at all times, given that we never know what's around the corner. Especially be sure that your vitamin D levels are ramped up. I will leave a link down to a vitamin D video of mine if you haven't seen those. And then exercise. Now, yes, exercise. Now, you may not feel like exercising when you're going through some kind of trauma, unless the trauma, you are feeling anger as an emotion, then especially aerobic exercise is good for that. But aerobic exercise kind of mimics you running away. And so that's going to help to get these fight or flight hormones flushed through your system. Aerobic exercise will help you do that. And then on the other side, yoga is amazing. You don't have to be brilliant at it. You just have to do a yoga session that gives you movement, slow movement that's relaxing and calming. And then breathing exercises. Breathing exercises, particularly square breathing, which I've demonstrated before. So I'm not going to do it now, but I will tell you what it is. It's simply breathing in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and then hold for 4 before you do the cycle again. Now, if this is good enough for Navy SEALs in the military to relax them quickly, it's going to work for you. And then sleep hygiene. You need to stick to a super healthy sleep routine, whether or not you go to sleep. Go to sleep at the same time every night. Do the same things before you go to bed. It being a routine will help you anyway, because your world's been turned upside down. You don't know what's going to happen when. If you have routines that you stick to, this helps get you through the day. Sleep you need, of course, and please don't turn to alcohol or drugs to help you do this. Now, you might take a drink to calm you down or help you through, and initially, although I probably shouldn't be saying this, but this is real, if you need a drink to get you through that night, then who am I to argue? But I would say only do it once, if at all. Alcohol, we know, will not help you to get a good night's sleep. You need to be rested and clear-headed. Now, all of these things you can do for yourself whilst you're actually going through the trauma. If it's a more quick shock traumatic experience, then these things will help you to heal afterwards. I would write all these things down. I'll possibly do a PDF for you, so that you've got them there to think about, and then you can be prepared, as prepared as you can possibly be, I think. Number 2 is choosing the way you think. Now, this might seem a strange thing to say, and in order to do that, you first of all have to be aware of your thoughts. We've talked tons about this on this channel. It's close to my heart, the power of your thinking. You have to learn to be conscious of your thoughts. I will leave links to some what I call stinking thinking videos, which are all about negative thoughts and negative thinking. But what I'm talking about here is not about positive thinking, it's about accurate thinking. So as far as possible, you need to keep catastrophizing in check. You know, you stand a much better chance of healing and dealing with trauma and of post-traumatic growth if you challenge any thoughts you have, such as that I had, for example, my life is over. I'm never going to be able to deal with this. What am I going to do? Oh my goodness, we're all going to hell in a handcart. Because what tends to happen when you're going through a trauma is your mind is totally focused on your situation, and you automatically seem to go into worst case scenario thinking. These same thoughts keep going round and round in your head without you coming to any kind of conclusion. Keeps going round and round in your head, keeping the fight or flight hormones flushing, raging through your body, slushing around. What we need to do is get you back to rest and digest. And you can do this by the breathing exercises I've just mentioned. You can do this by changing your environment. Big fans on this channel of getting out into nature. You know, and also by some kind of distraction if you need to do that, to get you into rest or digest mode, even just for 5 minutes or so, to enable you to accurate thinking, to look at the evidence behind whatever your catastrophic thinking is, and let that lead you to changing your thinking to more accurate thinking. So it's about looking at your thoughts and finding the evidence. And of course, you won't find the evidence which will lead you to think more clearly or more accurately. Now, it's not easy to do when you're in an emotional state. I understand that. But just accepting, you know, even accepting the fact that, yes, you are in a dire situation, but despite that, you can still choose to think that things can get better, that things will get better in time. This too shall pass. You can choose to think that way. And bring your thoughts to today, to what you need to do today to get through, and focus entirely on the present instead of future anticipatory anxiety about something that hasn't even happened yet. Whew. Then you can work with the actual facts of your situation right now. And this leads me on to number 3, because you may need help to do that, I know. And I'm talking here about strengthening your support system, which again you can be doing beforehand in preparation. You know, what do you tend to do when you feel under attack? Well, certainly in the early days for us, we circled the wagons. To a large extent, we withdrew from our society, if you like, feeling that nobody could possibly understand what we were going through. It was a very lonely time. I was brought up to believe that what happened at home stayed at home, and that stayed with me for most of my life. Now I know differently. Now I know that sharing your experience or thoughts about it or about something with a genuinely kind, compassionate and trustworthy person helps beyond measure. It still took me out of my comfort zone to share my innermost thoughts with someone else, but I'm certainly glad that I did. You know, that person could be a friend, it could be a family member, it could be a stranger, or it could be a professional person. And I spoke to all of those people at one time or another. And apart from anything else, it made me feel like we were less alone with our situation. So if you take anything away from today, it's that no matter what you are going through or have been through that may still be having an effect on your life, you are not alone. Someone else has been through exactly the same thing before you and not only survived, but gone on to use their experience in a more positive way, which leads to post-traumatic growth. Okay, so I hope you found that useful. I've left a PDF down below underneath the video so that you can keep that to hand. You know, if ever anything should happen, you'll have it right there for you to read. I've noted some of the most important points in there, but I've also added and included some extra resources for you. So please download that, and you'll also then become a part of my monthly newsletter. I know you all have busy email boxes, so it's a monthly newsletter that you'll be able to listen to all the good stuff and the new stuff that's happening on Happy Stuff and Fluff. And just incidentally, thank you so much to those of you who've bought the book. I'm very grateful for that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's this book, Voices of the 21st Century, Women Empowered Through Passion and Purpose. And it's a project that I'm very proud to have been involved with. I am giving one of these away, and I'm going to announce the winner in the next video. Okay, I'll see you then. Until then, remember that on the Happy Stuff and Fluff, we're getting happy, living longer, and growing younger. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.